Can you be your hero? White knight on the street. Promised all the world. Told you he would hold you with a love that always grows. Folks, we see that was once a long, long time. Staked your deepest, wildest dreams, wanting for life. You watched your happy ever after.
Jerry Metcalf shared this with me when she picked the song in the garden that Frank often would go on retreats to Trinity Heights over in Sioux City to reflect in the garden there. And so we're going to begin our service today by singing In the Garden. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other can ever know. He speaks, and the sound of His voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that He gave to me within my heart is ringing. And He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I stayed in the garden with Him, though the night around me is falling, but He bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is telling, and He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known, none other has ever known.
Let's start off first with a reading. I shared this with Frank about 10 years back. And he says, you know, Bill, I'd like to have of our time in history is that we have taller buildings but shorter tempers. Wider freeways but narrower viewpoints. We spend more but have less. We buy more but enjoy less. We have some degrees but less sense, more knowledge but less judgment, more experts but more problems, more medicine but less wellness. We drink too much, smoke too much, spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry, stay up too late, get up too tired, read too little, watch too much TV, and pray too seldom. We talk too much, love too seldom, hate too often. We've learned to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, but not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but had trouble crossing the street when you didn't admit. We've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We've conquered the atom, but not our prejudice. We write more, but learn less. We plan more, but we accomplish less. We learn to rush, but not to wait. We build more computers to hold more information, to produce more copiers than ever, but we communicate less and less. These are the times of fast food, slow indigestion, big men, small character, steep profits, and shallow relationships. These are the days of quick trips, disposable diapers, throwaway immorality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, and pills to do everything from cheer to quiet to kill. It's a time when there's much in the showroom window and nothing in the stockroom. A time when technology can bring this letter to you, and a time when you can choose to either share the insight or to just hit delete. Remember, spend some time with your loved ones because they're not going to be around forever. Remember, say a kind word to someone who looks at you in awe because that little person will soon grow up and leave your side. Remember to give a warm hug to the one next to you because that is the only treasure that you can give with your heart, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Remember to say I love you to your partner, your loved ones, but most of all to mean it. A kiss and an embrace will mend the hurt when it comes from deep inside you. Remember to hold hands and cherish the moment, for someday that person will not be there again. Give time to love, give time to speak, and give time to share the precious thoughts that are in your mind. The author is saying that it's people that are important. Not things or stuff or fame or fortune or notoriety, but people. Especially the ones that God has entrusted in our care. Our spouses, our children, our grandchildren, our relatives, the neighbor down the street, or too much of what is called love is nothing more than vineyard lost relationships built on selfish motives and insincere words. We say it, but we don't mean it. We mean it, we don't mean it because many don't really understand what love is. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it's called the love chapter. It says, love is patient and kind, not jealous, not boastful, not proud, rude or selfish, not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not gloat over people's sin, but takes delight in truth. Love bears all things, always trusts, always hopes, always endures. Love never ends. This is how it is displayed. That's its traits, its cosmetics. It's how we recognize it when we see it. It's not just an emotion because emotions change. That's why people supposedly fall in love one day and fall out of love the next. It's not intellectual because sometimes it makes no sense. Sometimes people die for people they don't even know. Fight for a cause they know they can't win. And it's not intellectual because sometimes it's not rational. The Bible says that it's really simply doing what's right in God's eyes. To my friends, my neighbors, my family, my fellow man, even my enemies. And Frank, I believe, always tried to do what was right. "36 years ago, Jim Pinker invited Frank and Jerry and I to his house for dinner. That's the first time I met Frank. As the night went on, we found out that we both liked to write songs. So Frank suggested that, well, occasionally we might get together and maybe do some co-writing and critique one another's work. So it started out as an occasional thing, became a weekly thing. Every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, down at the AEA office, we'd get there, and we'd be there till 9, 10 o'clock at night. Cherokee Paper did an article on us once. He says, "How would you describe your working relationship?" He says, "Well, it's kind of like the Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one." But we would joke behind the scenes that, no, they're probably more like the Three Stooges. Frank, being the leader with black hair, was Mo. Jim had curly hair, a little taller, he was Larry, and guess who got to be Curly? Go figure, right? But we started spending more and more time together. It was a wonderful time. About 5, 6 years, 7 years into it, I ended up moving north about 13 miles. A year or two later, Jim moved away, and that weekly get-together stopped. But me and Frank decided at least once a month we were going to do something. Sometimes we'd go to a movie, went to a dog track, go to a casino, went to some hockey games, baseball games. And the more time that we spent together, the more we realized we were alike. Not just in the things that we liked and disliked, but also in our past. It was almost amazing. For instance, both our dads drove beer trucks, kind of stoic in their personality. Our mothers were homemakers, more supportive and encouraging. We both had a brother that drowned, and we saw our parents go through that. He, at one time, was thinking about being a monk. And went into psychology. I at one time thought about going into psychology and ended up going into ministry for a while. Both of us worked for the state of Iowa. He for AEA and I had the Mental Health Institute. He counseled special ed kids. And my second job for 15 years, I drove the special ed school buses. And Frank worked with all the kids at home. He enjoyed them, loved them, and so did I. We were both divorced and remarried. Went to college to be elementary school teachers, and it didn't work out for either one of them. We both felt that Leonard Cohen and Paul Simon were probably the best songwriters and lyrics of our time. Tony Robbins, probably the best motivational speaker and writer. And we both came to believe that Brennan Manning was probably the best Christian author because he gets right down on his back. An author once said that we read to know that we're not alone. In other words, we read because we see people and find out that there's other people that's been where we've been, seen what we've seen, experienced what we've experienced. And in some ways, I guess me and Frank were reading each other's book. The highlight, though, was every month, Frank and I climbed in the car Hour and a half down Sloan, hour and a half back, and we'd talk about anything and everything. Psychology, theology, you name it, nothing was off the table. And I learned a few things along the way. Frank taught me a few things. He taught me that people need encouragement, they need appreciation, and they need to be accepted. And I would see him do that time and time again. He'd be playing a machine and somebody would sit down and he'd be talking to him, or a staff member. And it was like magic. They would just open up their book and they would tell him everything. Sometimes very personal things, problems they were having. Maybe it was a sickness, maybe it was a problem in a relationship, maybe it was finances. And Frank would always encourage them. Maybe give them some options. He attracted people, he liked people. He not only listened, but he heard what they were saying. And he cared when people were hurt. One time we were driving down the road and we were talking about people with addictions. And Frank says, you know, Bill, he says, I've come to the conclusion that people who have addictions, and it doesn't matter what the addiction is, or that people are acting in an irrational way, he says they're just trying to survive. And you know, when you start looking at people that way, you see the person instead of the addiction. Frank realized that what we take into this life might give us a living, but what we give makes a life. And Frank even talked about his buffalo trips. He loved his buffalo trips. He loved spending time with his brothers and sisters, and he would tell me some of the conversations that he had with them, some of the trials and tribulations they went through, and some maybe they're still going through. He loved them dearly. He talked to me about Sean. Very proud of Sean. The way he handles himself, the decisions he's made, the goals he's set, accomplishments he's had. But most of all, the good that he sees in you. And the man he became. And he would talk to me about Jerry. And he loved you all very, very much. When Frank first found that he had 4-stage cancer, he called me and he was pretty disabled. Of course, everybody with me. He goes, Bill, nobody survives 4-stage. I said, well, that's not true for me. I said, I saw some people on the internet that have. So I give him the site. And he called me back and he says, you're right. And he started his war against cancer. And he did everything humanly possible. He did the chemo, changed his diet. He'd take garlic and onions and all kinds of stuff and put it, make up a concoction. It's kind of like Colonel Sanders' special herbs and spices. And he would take it every day religiously. They gave him 8 months. He stretched it into 3.5 and 4 to 4. He wasn't a quitter. 9 months back, though, I could tell that the cancer was starting to get ahead of him. And things were getting harder. The burden became heavier. And I would tell him, say, Frank, maybe you need some help. No, I don't need no help. I'm doing fine. I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. But then he would say something to me, which he said, if not once, a dozen times. He says, you know, Bill, every morning Jerry wakes up and she gives me this huge smile. He says, it warms my heart. He says, I am blessed. So very, very blessed. It was only a sunny smile and a little accost in the evening, but it scattered the night like the morning light and made my day worth living. I'm sure the chemo and the change in diet and his magic concoction helped, but the thing that really kept him going was love. Because love bears all things. 7 or 8 months back, I think it was August or September, I got this urge. I should read the New Testament. A couple days later, I pick up Frank and we're headed down Roosevelt. We just go 2 or 3 blocks. And Frank goes, Bill, he said, I've decided I'm going to read the New Testament. I go, really? I said, I have the same urge. He goes, yes, but he says, I want to read slowly. I want to understand what it really says. And so from that time on, whenever I talk to him on the phone or on our trips, he'd say, yeah, I just read Matthew or I read Mark. He'd tell me things that he was learning. And in November, it was our next to last trip down the slope. And we're headed down the road. And he says, you know, Bill, he says, from what I've read, I've come to understand that I don't need to go to a church and walk down an aisle to be a Christian. I just need to believe that Jesus was who he said he was, and he did what he said he was going to do. That he died on the cross for our sins. We just ask him to forgive us into our life. And for 10 minutes, he explained to me the plan of salvation, which I had heard since then. I go, Frank, that's exactly right. When we're young, we learn. When we age, we begin to understand. I think Frank knew this all along. But finally, he began to understand what it really means. One day the little boy decided it was time for him to go out and see the world. So he took his little blue backpack and he filled it with some of his favorite toys, his clothes, his little piggy bank, and some of his favorite cookies. As he was going out the door, his daddy asked him, where are you going? And the little boy replied, I've decided I'm going to go out and see the world. His daddy smiled and says, fine, but if you should ever need anything, all you have to do is come to the door and knock. So the little boy put on his backpack, he climbed on his trike, and he headed down the sidewalk. The neighbor next door noticed that he kept going, circling the block, round and round. Curiosity got the best of him, so he walked outside and asked the little boy, what are you doing? He said, I've decided to go and see the world. But the neighbor said, don't you realize that all you're doing is circling the block? That's because my daddy won't let me cross the street without him. You and I know that there's nothing in that backpack that guarantees his survival on the other side of that street, or even getting across it. His security is not in the backpack, his security is in the hands of the Father. Frank has crossed the street. And when he did, he was holding the hand of the Father. Frank wasn't perfect. But Brennan Manning wrote and has so often said, God accepts us just as we are, not as we should be, because none of us are as we should be. Every week I would call Frank. Sometimes more. But every time I call, I could hear my voice and go, Bill, how you doing? I'm doing good. What you been up to? He always go, oh, a little this, a little that. And we talk. I'd say bye, and he'd always go, bye-bye. One day I'm going to cross that street. By the grace of God, I'm going to hold the Father's hand. And I can imagine seeing Frank. He just goes, hey Bill, how you doing? Good, Frank. What you been up to? Oh, a little this, a little that. At this time, no goodbyes. Yes, God accepts us as we are, not as we should be. But the question is, do we accept Him? Because that's where the security lies. And just as Frank says, you don't have to go to a church and walk down an aisle to be a Christian. You can do it anywhere, any place, anytime. Just say, yes, Jesus, I believe you died for my sin. Forgive me and come into my life. It's really that simple. If I were to ask you who Frank was, some of you would say, well, he was a colleague of mine. He was a husband, a father, a brother. If you ask me, I'll tell you. He was to me that friend that just sticks closer than a brother. And I miss him every single day. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, bring down your kingdom into this place and touch the souls that are here. Give us peace where there is no peace, comfort where there's heartache, joy where there's sorrow, health where there's sickness, and understanding where there's confusion. In Jesus' name. And may the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee shalom. And shalom in Hebrew means peace and prosperity in every area of your life. Amen. Amen. At this time, we'd like to open up the podium here. Anyone has something you would like to say or share that's on your heart? They ask that you come up here because of the recording. So, anyone?
I think you said it very well.
No, I'm not sure what I can say after listening to all of that. It was really so many things that were going on. And I sure remember back at a time when, well, my name was Greg Charge, for anybody that doesn't know. I was a special ed consultant that met Frank when he first came to town. Back in '76 was the second year of the agency. And Frank had applied for a job in our agency. Used to live in Superior, Wisconsin. and came down. He had applied for a job in our agency, which is made up of 6 counties. It was at that time, they used to call it Area 12. I sure remember him driving up to our office one day when I was there. Back in October. Sorry, guys. I knew Frank for a long time. That's a very good friend. Sorry about the emotional. I'll get away from that. But anyway, I knew when I first met him that very good guy, very interested in other people. Sure was a good guy to get to know. When I worked in the schools, and he did, I remember when he met Jerry and they got together, and I got to be best man at his wedding. Guys, I can't excuse me, I haven't spoken for a while. I didn't even expect that. I'm glad to be able to talk about Frank. He was a very good guy. Everything Bill said, hit it right on. He was really good with working with other staff. When you talk about somebody that was a good listener, he was. It didn't matter who it was he was talking to. He was very good with kids. He got the rapport from all of them and the teachers beyond what I used to see. I got to know him as a good friend and a co-worker, both equally so. There's many things that we did together. I know he sure enjoyed working with all of the staff and our agency. What he did as a school psychologist was work with kids and counsel, like what Bill had talked about. And sure worked with a lot of teachers, worked with us as staff. We enjoyed working with him. He was very knowledgeable. Made things very interesting, made the times go good. A lot of good recommendations to teachers. I'm kind of talking about some things that I was involved with him on a lot of times throughout the day. Close, listener, friendly, I already mentioned that. Kids of all ages, didn't matter who he was meeting with, elementary kids, high school kids. He would get their attention, and he really gave a lot of good information to kids as they got older. I know he was involved in the Palace program, and sure, did a lot of good things with younger kids back at that time. Kids that, had different problems and needed extra. That was Frank. Boy, he enjoyed that. He was a great conversationalist. And he put it back on the task, but I didn't put it back quite well. One thing I gotta say about Frank that I kind of got a kick out of, and there was a lot of things, but when it was time to eat, I knew I had it made being connected with him, and we did as an office too, because if we were going out somewhere, Frank would be the one that would call him ahead of time. Hey, by the way, when do you guys serve? Now, might have been some place he's been at before, but he was getting things set up for us all to get there to make sure they had everything ready to roll. It didn't matter what town we were in, and it happened a lot here in Cherokee too, and I don't know if everybody always noticed that, but he did. He was checking. I knew when we got there, we weren't going to be short of anything, because Frank would do that every time. Yeah, and I sure do remember my wife and I and Frank and Jerry getting together too a lot, thinking about the family stuff. Yeah, Bill, as I heard you talking about the family, I sure did see that too. I knew he kept very close contact, Sean. Sure can remember him talking about a lot of that. And yeah, kept close contact. He did go up monthly for a long time to see you. And I thought that was always good, the way he did that. I knew he went with Jerry to see her family in Manly. a lot of times. And he sure went back to Buffalo area every summer, one after another. You know, he'd tell me about all of that. Yeah. He had a lot of strengths. Something I've got to say is he was very creative too. Like Bill had talked about when they used to get together to compose some music and play the guitars and so on. I gotta tell you something. In the very early stages, I didn't know. I wasn't sure. Hey, is this a real short-range hobby, you guys? And then, as they met more and more, they got better and better. And Frank was writing songs, and then later on, he starts publishing these. He went to Nashville summer after summer for quite a while. Met a lot of important people down there. He did have some songs that were published by one of the publishers he got to know pretty well, and some of the stuff got played in other countries quite a bit as well. A lot of different things he did, and then later on he got into writing. I knew he had the background for that. I mean, I thought he was one of the best editors of anything. If we did reports, he'd find them, straighten out whatever immediately. But he loved writing, and he started writing a book, and a lot of that was about his life when he was younger. Very interesting, as I, read through some of that. And that book got published. I remember as he worked on it stage by stage, it took a long time. There's a lot to that. He really, when he set a goal, the guy would really stick with it, Didn't matter what it was, he'd follow through, and he had so many different things that he was interested in. Interesting guy. I don't know, that's just some. We sure became good friends over the years, too. I was lucky to be able to meet with him in Akron over the last couple of years before he passed away. And we purposely got together and kept up to date on things. It was good to see him. And to see him in that situation. One last thing too, we went to the pizza ranch there. People got to know him so well. They did. They really got a kick out of me. I'm talking about the daughter and the mother and the husband. I know him that place. And they would ask me a lot about him and kept contacting. I even got a call, as he was getting worse. They were watching that. And were very concerned and hoped that he was doing okay. It's just another example of people that he had contact with. They got to know him, they really liked him. Thanks much. Glad to get a chance to see a lot of you. It's good to see some of you that I saw way back at that wedding. That was a long time ago. I've heard about different ones that were back in the New York area. I felt like they were part of the family because he talked about them often. And I just wanted to say to you, Frank, you will be missed by all my friend, and we will never forget you. Good to talk to you guys. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful job.
Anyone else?
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to read a note from Jerry. A couple remarks he wanted to have said. And then I'll start with mine real quick. here today to honor the life of a wonderful human being, Frank Gallagher. He truly cared for people. He loved and cared for me over 43 years. He was a great husband, father, and friend to all. He left the world a better place. Love, bears, happens, and I shall cherish his memory forever. Yeah, it's great. Because I always took an interest in what was going on in my life. Whether I was on the mountaintop or in the valley, or anywhere in between. Always encouraging. Always in my corner, 100%. Just a deeply caring person, not to just myself as his only son, but to his family and his friends and his colleagues and anybody he came in contact with. It's amazing what Bill had said. He didn't really know any strangers. He talked to anybody, anywhere, anytime, and made you feel welcome. I always felt his love constantly, no matter if I was standing beside him talking to him or 1,000 miles away. I'm truly proud of the life he lived, the impact that he had on people. The one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when I moved to Cherokee at age 13, he was involved in that house program, and kind of like a big brother type thing. He was a pal to a young boy named Brian Rupp, and apparently Brian and him met every other weekend on Saturdays for an hour or two, for many years, I guess. And thank you. And he invested his time and his life into Brian, and it just made me proud as his son to know that he was sharing his life with somebody else too, to make a positive impact on a young man. So when I go bowling on Saturdays down here at the bowling alley, he'd be with Brian playing my Atari game in my house. Whatever they would do, go mini golfing, maybe go to Dairy Queen, I don't know. But I'm sure Brian, if he was here, he would be sharing all kinds of neat stories. But Brian did post on the website here some of his memories. I really appreciated Brian doing that. Anyway, it's just a side of my dad that I don't think anybody really, I know he didn't really talk about it, but it just, it made an impact on me years later when I got to thinking about it and I read Brian's post on the thing in tribute to my dad. It just made me feel really good to know that he touched a lot of lives in different ways. And I think, if anything, that's his legacy, the lives he touched. I know we all have our special memories of him, and he's in our hearts. And that's where he'll always be in mine. And I want can say other than I just loved him dearly and I'll miss him dearly, but he won't be forgotten, ever. Great, oh God, great dad. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, John.
Hi, my name is Kathy Jokums. I worked with Frank for a long time, and not as long as everybody here, certainly not as long as Vicki and Craig. But Frank and I became friends fairly quickly, and I'm so glad to meet you, Bill, because I've heard about you for years. And just like everyone's mentioned, the trips to Buffalo, the trips to Nashville, Jerry, and trips to Arizona, and trips to the casino. And Frank had so much passion, you know, and in addition to just making anyone he talked to feel like they were the only person in the world, you know. And you remember the things that we talked about, the things that were said. He did have an instant rapport with people. He just had a ton of passion, and he had his priorities right. One of the things we were talking about earlier this week was our lunches. And lunch was really important. But Frank got it. He got it because he understood that was our self-care. That was, our lunches never involved any work talk. And there were times that those lunches went on well beyond an hour. And if it was a pizza place, he would make sure that the right things were on the buffet. You know, that was an absolute priority. There wasn't a time that I went to work, we were a team, and we did not go out to lunch. And, you know, my husband and I at the time had young children, and it was probably not the best expense in the world, but he didn't mind because, you know, he would hear then the stories about whatever the things were that we talked about. And there was no subject that was off the table. But a lot of times it was family and it was friends. And I really was glad that even as he got close to retirement that we had a connection and kept meeting and kept having coffee once every couple of months. And I was always so impressed, and when I say this about his priorities, I was so impressed that he put people first, and he put quality of life first, and he put his passions where he needed them to be, whether that was his writing or his music or his quest to end female genitalia mutilation. And we all got those emails, and we all passed them on to our congressman, and my kids learned a little bit about, we got a email back from a congressman after we did that, so my kids got this great, you know, civil education because of something real that actually happened. And you know, but Frank was always really he was my champion and the best cheerleader and maybe best friend I could have ever had, because there was nothing I could have done, no mistake I could have made that he couldn't find another perspective, and a perspective that honored, you know, what my intention was, however the misstep may have happened. And he always did those things sincerely. The other thing that I guess I enjoyed so much was that Frank really knew how to play. And he knew how to laugh and have fun, and there were more than a few times that he and I got ourselves into trouble at region meetings or whatever because we would get sidetracked on some whatever, and then our little ADHD would kind of feed off of each other just like third graders, but it was fun. I laughed so hard I cried, you know. I think about some of those experiences and I laugh again, or I find myself just smiling because my mind is back in whatever that conversation was, or whatever that, little argument was, or, and his writing was brilliant, and funny and creative, and we about got ourselves kicked out of the library here writing your exit IEP, Greg. We decided to get together in Cherokee. Greg was retiring, so we decided we're going to write an exit IEP. So, of course, that's a roast, of course. And we were shushed several times in the Cherokee library upstairs, so it hadn't been out of control. And the other thing is I didn't care, because it was so fun. I just was so filled with joy, laughing with him. And, his conversation, Sean, he had you on such a pedestal. He was so proud of his son, and he would tell me how lucky he was. He could always find all of the things to be thankful for, and all the things to be grateful for, and all of the things that he was lucky about. And so I'm sure I'm forgetting a number of things I may have wanted to say, but I miss him. I miss him. I've missed him a lot in the past couple of years, because we only could get together here and there, And I missed him a lot this fall, because when the cancer started getting ahead of him, it got ahead of him fast, And I am thankful that didn't go on too terribly long. And I'm so thankful that he, as far as I'm concerned, he won, he beat that. He did make 6 months into almost 4 years. And good years. I would talk to him and say, how you feeling? I'm feeling pretty good. They said I'm not hurting. I'm not hurting. And then the garlic and the oxygen drops and the different ideas. But he always had a way of just making whatever my life was, the thing that was the most interesting thing, And he would guide me with my kids, guided me with my husband. Our husbands don't realize, Alicia knows this, our husbands don't realize how much he's helped our marriages. Because he could just normalize what we're thinking, what they're doing, what's different, where the communication was. But I'm so thankful that I had the time that I had, that I could count myself as a friend of friends. And honestly, when I think about him, I wind up smiling. And I'm so appreciative of that. So thank you guys for sharing your wonderful Frank with the rest of us. And I love him very much.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I lived a life that's full, I traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway. much more than this. I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off much more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my way. I've loved and laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, that he has not to say the words he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. Let the record show I took the blows and did it my way.
It's easier if you get in touch with you.
Okay.
She started with love and walked in the door, and ended with a lonely nights walking the floor. She was getting ideas that scared her before. But what did she love that she won't miss anymore? She recalled while heading up